And welcome back to our discussion. American Readiness, Renewable Power, and Efficiency Technology, sponsored by Honeywell this morning here on Federal News Radio 1500 AM and federalnewsradio.com. My guests today are Mike Madsen. He's the president of the Defense and Space Strategic Business Unit of Honeywell Aerospace. Rear Admiral Kevin Slates, director of the Energy and Environmental Readiness Division in the Office of the Chief of Naval Operations. Major General Al Aycock is Director of Operations for the Assistant Chief of Staff for Installation Management at the Army. Dan Ammon is the Senior Advisor for Energy, Planning, and Review for the Environmental Protection Agency. And Roberto Guerrero is the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Energy at the Air Force. And we want to get into some of the financing and contracting arrangements that enable a lot of this energy savings to take place. And in the Army, a third-party financing has become important. Al, tell us how that works and what kind of benefits you're getting from it.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for the question. The benefits that we get is that we really have to work hard with our budget. And being only able to have a one-year budget and a 5-year planning window for how we operate our energy program, we need to rely on our utility and our private partners to be able to look farther out than that. So we can bring in a private partner or a utility onto our installation. They can help us regenerate energy and save energy using the savings as how we pay the particular cost. But now the private partner, the utility, can amortize the cost of their investment on the installation to do that over a 25 to 50-year period. And we are not able to do that in the federal government. So we look for proven technology from utilities and from private industry that we can then implement on our installations. Another example would be our Energy Initiatives Task Force, which is doing the larger 10-megawatt projects, primarily with the local utilities, but also with private companies. We bring them onto the base. We have the issue that most folks don't have in their areas, that we don't worry about the not in my backyard problem. We want them to be on the post, and we want to be the first customer of that renewable energy that they're producing. And that gives us energy reliability because we'll also maintain our normal relationship with the off-post utilities. So that gives us more than one form of energy that we can rely on. We can also feed back into microgrids, which is another area where we've had great success to keep certain parts of our post operating even during natural disasters such as hurricanes or ice storms.
And what is the difference between a microgrid and just the normal wiring that would be at a town or base or area?
It would be the self-containment of that microgrid. The microgrid itself can operate separately from the power. I can divert power into that particular area, so I can keep the post open. I just have to have the power source attached to that so I can turn it on when the main power goes off.
And when these utilities come in other words, they're building generating capacity at their expense and basically selling it to the Army? Is that how the third-party financing works?
The third-party financing works in that they're able to amortize the cost of that investment over a much longer period than we can invest at. And then the payment actually comes from how much they save. And so as the energy comes in, they get the money back based on how much they save us.
So that's a little different from an energy-saving performance contract. A slight variation on the theme, or is it basically the same thing, Mike?
Well, it's actually very similar to what the General said. Typically, an energy savings performance contract does use a third party, an industry partner or a finance partner or both. And I think it's, as the General said, the advantage of this is not only does it work really well with the government contracting mechanisms, which are typically on a one-year budget, an ESPC that's funded by a private partner such as Honeywell or an industry partner or a financing partner allows that investment to be made by the vendor, by the supplier. We get paid back out of the energy savings we generate. So not only does it work with the government contracting mechanism, but it creates a really nice incentive for the contractor to do what they said they would do. We're going to go put a bunch of equipment in that's going to save 10 or 20% savings. It really needs to, because that's how we're going to pay for that equipment. That's how our finance partner is going to pay for that equipment. So it's kind of a win-win. It generates the energy savings, but it also creates this incentive to really overdrive on those savings by the contractor.
I think, Tom, to add on to what these two gentlemen said, so to me there's kind of three basic tools that we've used for financing. And, first, we still like to spend our money if we have money, and I think the general would say the same thing if he had it.
It's a big if these days.
Because clearly the quick payback stuff, hey, if I can afford the investment, then I get the payback right away. That's beneficial for us as a service. In those cases where we can't, we use the ESPC contracts, which, there are, roughly a dozen or 16 of these ESCO companies out there that, we all work through DOE with. The great thing about it is, as Mike was saying, is there's a measure and verification process. So they have to demonstrate what savings up front, and then there's a measure and, validation process after those, improvements have been made or those efficiencies. So in addition to ESPCs, there's also UESCs, where we're working with utility providers. So in that case, if it's, I'm, buying electricity from a certain, public utility, private utility company, same thing. Are there some efficiency opportunities on that distribution transmission system that connects to the base where we can basically finance through them and then pay back over time and rates? And then the other one would be kind of power purchase agreements. And I think we're all doing that to some extent, with renewable energy. So with renewable energy, in order for, some private entity to come up with the capital, obviously, to be able to, support that project, they're looking for an off-taker over a period of time. So we've got the ability, to basically sign up to a 30-year power purchase agreement, guaranteeing that we're going to buy power from them. And the nice thing from a, fiscal standpoint is you can actually, define what that rate structure is 30 years out. So you can budget for it. And all those tools, in my opinion, are great opportunities for us in the services.
Dan?
And that's all very true. And one of the differentiation things here with ESPCs and UESCs are pretty much the same across the government. But the PPAs, there's a differentiation between civilian agencies and the military agencies. They have the 30-year ability to go out of 30-year contracts. Civilian agencies can only sign 10-year contracts for the PPAs. So it's a little more difficult. As a civilian agency, we've tried to do some of these PPAs, but it's hard to fit it within that time. Yes, for 10 years. So one of the issues we're working on right now with OMB and with actually Defense Logistics Agency is to put a new vehicle together that'll be a hybrid ESPC PPA vehicle, and it's the first of its kind. It's just been cleared through OMB because OMB has new guidance around their renewables that we're going to be able to make an award strictly for renewables on a longer time frame. So it's a kind of a hybrid vehicle between an ESPC and a PPA that'll give the civilian agencies some more flexibility on these things because it's a little different world.
I imagine there's a lot of calculating and really some sharp pencil pushing that has to happen before you sign one of these things so everybody's clear on all of the numbers and so forth. Roberto?
Yeah, and I would say that working with the Council on Environmental Quality and with the sister services, we've really learned a lot from one another on the best ways to execute these contracts. They're complex. In some cases, they take several months to get executed, and we found that by getting together and working with the Council on Environmental Quality and our sister partners outside the services, the other departments, that we've learned a lot on how to execute. The Air Force has a goal. We all have goals that we work with the Council on Environmental Quality to meet, and the Army has done extremely well in meeting those goals, and also in working with the other services to show us, in ways that they've been able to crack the code on getting a good contract on contract quickly.
And to have a good contract, you need a good contractor. And we have seen some bankruptcies and so forth in the renewable energy field. And there's startups that don't work out very well, and even some utilities. They do go out of business sometimes. They'll take on a capital project that doesn't work out for them. So what kind of vendor evaluation do you do to make sure that partner is going to be there in 25 or 30 years? At least you have some reasonable assurance that it will be, and that you're not stuck with a contract that has no meaning when something happens 10 years down the line. Mike, you want to try that one?
Yeah,
Honeywell's been around a few years.
Yeah, I was going to say we've been around quite a while. I think that that can occur. It's generally not an issue with the DoD. The DoD has lists of folks they work with. They know they go through an evaluation process from a vendor security perspective to make certain that the vendor's financially secure and capable of doing what they said they would do. And of course, there's always protections in these contracts. This really is, it's not a matter of a lot of risk for the government in the context of technology or the viability of the companies for the most part. It really is a matter of the construct of the contract, making certain that we can generate the returns that we're signing up for, and then having a good, viable way to measure those returns. I like that about these contracts, actually, though, because it forces that heavy thinking up front. It forces everyone, both the buyer and the seller, to be very careful and thoughtful about what they're getting into. And generally, when you do that, you get good outcomes.
So I imagine maybe if the Army is the partner, that might help ensure the viability of the contractor, because the Army is not going away.
That's a great point. The government's going to be here, and our bases are going to be here for a while. We are looking to downsize the bases. We are getting smaller as an Army, and so we're still looking for that opportunity. But as an Army, we're still going to be here. And one of the keys behind that is that in addition to the vetting that goes on beforehand, as each project comes through, we board the projects with all of our experts, and we make sure that we've dotted all the I's and crossed all the T's. And we're working hard on our execution. As we get more into this particular area, we're realizing that we need to shift from the execution up front and do more follow-up at the tail end of these things to make sure that they're not just planned right, but they're being executed right on the ground. And so we're putting a lot of emphasis on that in the coming year.
And what about overseas? I mean, yes, the military, there's base closures that are happening and there's shrinkage in forces, but yet look at the Marine Corps. They're changing the location where they are in Japan, Okinawa. There's a lot of construction going on over there, so there is some actually greenfield work going on there. So are the new bases coming in, the new installations coming in a way that can really be efficient from the outset? What are you looking at there?
So from the Navy perspective, and in this case, I can talk for my brother sister service, the Marine Corps. There are no new bases. We're maybe realigning some of our assets from one installation to another overseas. The contracting tools are a little different in some of the locations. I think, the established places where we are, places like Japan and Guam and things like that, where we've got a pretty, sound contractor industrial base that supports us, we're doing the same things that we are, with our bases here in the U.S. as far as contracting types. We've got some remote places like, Guantanamo Bay, Diego Garcia, where frankly it's pretty high cost to produce energy because there isn't anything around, and we're having to haul fuel in there. So we are looking at those places very hard, because the nice thing about those places too is the sun shines and the wind blows. So there are some great opportunities there for renewables. Maybe a little more of a challenge to find that private sector partner who wants to go and build something in the middle of the Indian Ocean, but we're aggressively pursuing that.
All right, and what about some of the sources, too? Because utilities are building different types of things, and I know in some of the bases out west there are solar situations. Elsewhere there might be some wind farms under construction, and then we heard natural gas, too, even as a source. So how do you know what is the right way to go for a particular location? Is it based on weather or something more than that?
Yeah, I think based on weather, based on the location, availability of sun, wind, all those factors are going to go into vetting these particular proposals to see which one works best for the service.
Tom, I'd kind of onto what Mr. Guerrero said. I think the way I look at it is a little differently. One, we don't necessarily want to own those renewable production sources. We want the power. We want to buy the renewable power from whoever owns that, whether it's a utility company or a private investor. And while we all, I think, rely on a branch of DOE called NREL, which has great data on where the wind blows, where the sun shines, and all that stuff that helps us out. To me, a lot of that risk is on the investor who's building the project. I want to buy so much power at a certain price over a period of time, and kind of looking for the private sector expertise in a lot of cases to define what that right mixture of renewable and storage really is.
Mike?
Yeah, I would agree with what the Admiral said. And from an industry perspective, we're looking at it from a payback perspective. What's going to generate the most amount of savings with a reasonable investment. We've generally seen there's a lot of stuff that's available today, like building controls, smart use of insulation, using things like microgrids to allow you to take advantage of low cost power rather, when it's available, and balancing that against high cost peaking power, and not using as much of that. Those tend to be the technologies that we see are A, readily available, and B, have a great payback. Things like solar, things like wind power, sometimes they make a lot of sense, and sometimes the payback isn't as good. Again, this contracting mechanism puts us in the same boat with the services, causes us to look at it not as a point sale, but as an ongoing partnership. We're going to make the investment back on the energy savings. We're going to have to make certain that it makes sense as well. And I would echo the Admiral's comments that the services aren't trying to be in the power generation business. They just want to have a lower cost of consumption of this energy, and it's really the industry partners that got to bring that technology to bear.
But I guess what I was trying to get at is you need some assurance that the service level agreement ultimately that you come up with can be fulfilled. You don't want it to not happen despite everybody's best efforts. Is that?
Yeah, that generally works, though, because the contracts don't last forever, and they have waypoints along the way that we measure the benefits and how we're doing. And that, in fact, that's one of the real positives, is that you're not going to go forever. You're going to go maybe 10 years, 5 to 10 years, and then you're going to get a renewal of the contract. And during that period of time, you're not only making certain that what you're doing is working, you're thinking about what's next, what comes behind that.
All right. So a lot of contracting and partnership issues. When we come back from this break, we're going to talk about some of the technologies that are available to help energy reduction. Our guests today are Dan Ammon. He's Senior Advisor for Energy Planning and Review for the Environmental Protection Agency. Major General Al Aycock is the Director of Operations for the Assistant Chief of Staff for Installation Management at the Army. Rear Admiral Kevin Slates is Director of the Energy and Environmental Readiness Division in the Office of the Chief of Naval Operations for the Navy. Mike Madsen is President of the Defense and Space Strategic Business Unit of Honeywell Aerospace. Roberto Guerrero, he's Deputy Assistant Secretary for Energy at the Air Force. I'm your moderator, Tom Temin. This discussion is American Readiness, Renewable Power and Efficiency Technologies, sponsored by Honeywell, here on Federal News Radio 1500 AM and federalnewsradio.com.